You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG.
Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss the art of Shadowdark. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name's Jody, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Matt. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. I was just perusing this lovely hardcover I have in front of me. Oh, what is that? This is the Shadowdark core rulebook.
Oh, a little light reading and weapon in a pinch.
Oh, is that a Hanker Inferno original?
Indeed it is.
Perhaps,
Today's
perhaps
episode.
Skillhelm.
Indeed it is. Both and then some and others at all. Today's episode, we're going to focus on Shadowdark's art, which doesn't come from a specific event at the table so much as a text you received, Matt. So why don't you take us to it?
Yeah, so recently we talked on the show about Dolmenwood, and I got a text after that from my sister, who I didn't realize listened to the show, but shout out to her for putting up with not just having to listen to me on Monday nights during our 5e game and throughout our entire life together as siblings, but also now on the show. But her text to me was very interesting because she was commenting on the fact that when we were discussing Dolmenwood, specifically you, Jody, were talking about your difficulty connecting with the setting. She made the point that art is one of the most powerful ways to introduce someone to a particular setting. And she specifically called out that she was having a hard time connecting with Pathfinder as a setting because it felt discordant that there were like gunslingers and like inventors or like I guess, you know, what you might call like artificers from like 5th edition alongside wizards and druids and the like. That fantasy was kind of difficult and discordant, but that, you know, the art kind of tried to reinforce what the fantasy of the game was about. And I told you about this, Jody, and you made the comment that actually the thing that started to cement you in the world of Dolmenwood was specifically when I started attaching art pieces to the follow-up emails that I send the day after our sessions, and that really helped in kind of ground you in the world. And so it's very clear to me that art has the ability to convey the tone and themes of a particular setting and of a particular game.
All right, so let's gather around the fire. And this is a little bit different style of an episode. We're going to unpack not just that idea, because this isn't really GM-y bits and nuts and bolts of how to run a session or how to walk around in the woods or how to, you know, watch people die better at your table or whatever it is. This one is a little more philosophical. We're going to talk about the art that is in Shadowdark and other role-playing games and what impact that has and how that influences both you as a GM and your player base. Now, Matt, I'm just going to jump in at the high levelist of questions, and I think it's a clear intentionality. When you think about the art that adorns the cover of the Shadowdark books, both the regular and collector's edition, or just within, you know, what is that art saying to you? What is it telling you right away of like, hey, here's what you need to be aware of?
All right, so I want to go straight from the thing that strikes me the most about the art is that it is black and white. And for the most part, it's black and white, and it conveys kind of gritty, grimy, dark fantasy. And for me, that is helpful, mostly because I know that that's what the game is going to convey to my players.
And that's essential, that idea of what are your players seeing. And when it's done well, I think there's undeniably a piece where mechanically the game is delivering on those beats. You don't have a ton of hit points. Your abilities or talents aren't allowing you to do superhuman feats of daring do. Your equipment matters a tremendous amount, and it features heavily in the art of the Shadowdark book. There's a wonderful center spread with a strange Cthulhuid in the background and heroes on a long bridge heading towards a dark temple, and they're literally like pulling somebody up on a rope, and those ropes and those staves and those torches and that darkness, that black and white darkness is ever present. That's the one that jumps out to me, is how heavily the book makes use of shadow and negative space in the sense of just background that's blacked out.
Darkness. Shadows that convey darkness, Jody.
They might say that. They might.
Moving past that incredibly bad pun, one thing that you said very early in kind of our discussions of role-playing games was how much you loved the early, 1980s module line art.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, I thought, well, that's kind of strange. This is very basic, and it's very kind of it's like very pedestrian, right? And then, but I want you to talk about like why do you find it so charming? Number one, and you actually made an argument that I found rather persuasive about why it's good that art exists, and why the art that is in some of the newer books isn't bad art, but that it doesn't offer the same kind of visceral effect.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a modern role-playing book with modern art design, Shadowdark notwithstanding, but the kind of classic bigger brands, Dungeons & Dragons being the obvious example here, there's no question that the technical proficiency demonstrated by the artists in these modern books in comparison to the original 1970s, early 1980s D&D artwork that was to a degree outsourced to friends and fan submissions, on a technical level, the current stuff is much advanced, is vastly superior. However, that black and white, very simplistic artwork that exists in those very early modules and rule books, and I can't take credit for this. I heard it somewhere, but to me, it just is the beautiful encapsulation of this. And unfortunately, I can't cite my source because I don't know where I heard it, is because of that black and white line work, because of that kind of simplicity of that art, it's inviting you to join in it. When you see a rendering of a insert name of monster and you think, I could do that, or you're inclined to trace it or draw around it or something, that's inviting you to take part in the game in a much the same way that you take part in the actual game experience. You're seeing art that you feel like, I could reproduce that, or I could trace that, or I could follow along with that. And line art, even when it's much higher quality, like the Shadowdark rulebook, we have a lot of line art where it's just black and white. It still has that inviting quality of, I could trace that. I could draw some of those elements. Whereas when you see a fully realized, full color, fully shaded and photorealistic image, it doesn't do that for most folks. You don't see that and go, gosh, I could do that. So there's an invitation to not only copy it, but then engage with it on a very personal level. And then that invites you further to play the game, because you could do a tracing of a face of a character, and then that could be your character's art, and you could make little changes to it. And so that black and white line work art, as simplistic as it appears, again, in comparison to a fully rendered full color piece, what it's providing is an invitation and a simplicity that invites you to draw and play along with it. It is reminiscent of those wonderful, we all did them, the doodles in the margins of our worksheets from school. All of those kind of ideas are so central. The piece I mentioned a little bit ago that is just the adventurers on a bridge and there's a collection of scenes, the torches are literally just white spots. There's no shading, there's no color, there's no flame effect. It's just an outline of a kind of flamey design. That's the easiest thing in the world to draw. And so you start doodling that, and before you know it, you're, an hour deep into a meeting and you realize you haven't been paying attention because you were doodling a kick-ass torch.
Well, so I want to actually take this step further and say that the trade dress of Shadowdark is also art, right? I mean, it mm-hmm. literally the way that a book is designed to look to the reader, the way that the text and the art is displayed on the page is its own kind of art form. It is in Shadowdark, inviting in the way that you just pointed out that this old art was inviting because it was very basic and inviting to people because it was approachable. The trade dress of Shadowdark is approachable in a way that makes it feel like, oh, I could make a class or I could make content for Shadowdark, and I don't have to make it look like the 5th edition rulebooks. And that's not to say that Shadowdark looks bad. It looks approachable, and it looks clean, and it looks deliberate in a way that both asks you to create for the game, but also belies the art form of writing, the art form of the terse writing in the book. And this is a direction I don't want to go too far down because it's not really the core of what we were wanting to talk about. But like, I can't have a conversation about the quote unquote art of Shadowdark without talking about its artful delivery of its text in terms of the trade dress. And in its simplicity, it both invites you in, but it also belies the what I think is some of the most artistic work, which is the writing. And I don't know how that hits your ear, Jody, and I don't really know how to get back to the actual artwork in the book.
That notion of accessibility is huge in that you can very easily, if you have an editing software, generate something that looks very in keeping and in line with the Shadowdark rulebook and the Cursed Scrolls, that your stuff can look very much the same. And I can say, as somebody who has mooched from you, Matt, all those assets and now has made my own stuff, it's deeply satisfying. Also, great choice of font. It is insanely readable. I use it for all kinds of things now. But that all ties together. There is a lot to be said. In fact, there is my very early years, very briefly dabbled as an art major and then realized I wasn't any good at making the art, there's a lot to be said for what you take away, both in writing and in art. What's the choices you make about what to leave out, the spaces you leave. In Japanese art, there's an entire culture and style of art where it's largely about what's absent and allowing and inviting the reader that time and space to fill in on their own. And I think that's the beauty of Shadowdark. And it's something I think we've talked about on the show indirectly a lot, that our approach to Shadowdark is one of, and I dare say the juice that draws us in and keeps us coming back, and why I feel very comfortable at this point in saying Shadowdark is my forever fantasy RPG system. It is my home system, undeniably now, because it has that space, not only in the art, not only in the prose, not only in the layout, all of it says, hey, this is a toolkit, and literally has, sections of the book that tell you, hey, this is a toolkit. There's lots of room for you here. There's lots of room for you to take part in this. And I'm going to segue a little bit to some of the modern counterparts that, while the polish is undeniable, and I'm going to actually break a little bit away from...
I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, a little bit away from even tabletop role-playing. There's a number of companies that have incredible IPs and entire teams of artists. For those of you who know, Warhammer, their art and their design work is, in terms of miniatures at the tabletop, for that style of polish and production level, they are second to none. They are able to produce both a volume of work and a quality of work with regularity that is hard to deny the quality therein. There's not much room for you, though. You either like what they're doing or you don't. And if you don't, it's a matter of taste and preference, and that's fine. But there's not much room for you to create something entirely new in that space. And there used to be. And I love that about Shadowdark, is it's taking us back to that time when there used to be space for you.
So this is such a huge... I'm so glad that you took the conversation here, Jody, because I think this is where it gets really fruitful, is in talking about the space left for GMs and players. And I actually want to make mention of the fact that there seems to be, and I think Kelsey has said this definitively, there is an implied setting for Shadowdark, but it is very, very much on the implied part, not the setting
bespoke part. Yeah.
The art is where I see a lot of the setting implied There's a piece of art that sits on the first page of the characters spread, where the title page for the characters section of the book, on the facing page, there is this lovely piece of art with 4 characters exploring what looks to be like a haunted wood. It's delightful. There's a torch. It's got all the things you want.
'Tis a banger.
What I notice about this, and what I kind of take away from it, is an implied setting of my characters that I'm running for should be in places that look like this. If they're not in a dungeon, then they're probably in a dark wood, this like fecund wood that has, there's a skull in the bottom right-hand corner of this image. There are funguses growing, mushrooms and things. The trees themselves have little craters in them. There's a bat flying overhead with a whole kind of fleet of bats. I'm not quite sure of what the plural of bat is.
Bats is.
What's the...
Bats.
Okay. It's a whole bunch of bats. I was trying to make it dramatic, and you made it.
I joked it. I'm sorry.
Yep,
I did the player thing.
But all that is to say is that what this piece of art does is it establishes a mood, a tone, and a scene, but it doesn't do so in a way that forces players to... It doesn't force players into a particular frame of mind. What I love about this is these characters are looking around. They aren't engaged in some heroic act of combat. Whereas if you look at 5th edition art as a foil, not that 5th edition art is bad or whatever, but the vast majority of the art pieces that show characters in the world are characters in action. They are leaping towards a monster. They are engaged in combat. They are defending themselves from some crazy thing in a way that is heroic. Whereas here, the first thing you see when you open up to the characters section is a group of 4 characters investigating, looking around. They aren't scared. They look capable, but they also aren't engaged in some heroic act of combat and epicness.
The goblin art for the wizard class takes me right there as well. If you have this picture of a goblin like leaning around a corner, loosing a magic missile, and it looks surreptitious. It looks like it is using terrain to its advantage. It is dropping an ambush on somebody or something to that effect. There is an implication of you're going to need to be careful. You're going to need to be clever. And yes, you're capable. Yes, you have your swords. And often there's pictures of people gathering loot or assessing the value of things. That notion of those goods, again, having value, it's that implied, here's how you're going to engage with this game. And it's so powerful that not only does it tell you how to engage, but then leave space for you to go, but could I also add my own thing here? And both of those pieces come together so powerfully in the layout and art of Shadowdark that it's really wonderful. There was a recent podcast and web episode of Guerrilla Miniatures Games, Ash, and he's been on YouTube for years, and he does a lot of tabletop wargaming stuff. But he was talking about, in just this kind of open forum format he's been doing, of just talking about these ideas of when a brand moves from being kind of an art and like a passion project, and it becomes a brand. And once you become the brand, you kind of have to be everything for everyone. And your sister's text really took me back there to Pathfinder is undeniably Paizo, and the Pathfinder brand is a brand. like I don't know how else to say that. They have a responsibility to meet the needs of a wide variety of players. And that's a great thing. Dungeons & Dragons has a responsibility now to meet the needs of a really wide number of players. And so, yeah, artificers need to have a place, and the person who wants to play a bird person needs to have a place at their game, and an automated robot person, and also the gritty fighter who is missing a tooth. All of those things need to coexist, and to make that work is frankly pretty difficult. So you go with a really high-end art design and it looks great. It looks flashy and cool. But again, for me, it's always about that. When I see those pictures, am I immediately engaged by that story? Am I engaged by that art? And what you were just describing of that player's piece of art, it's engaging. I want to know what those guys are looking at. I want to know what's in their backpacks and where are they headed? Where are they going? And I see somebody slaying a dragon. I'm like, that's really cool. Oh, well, that's kind of it. Like, I just don't feel that pull in, and that's subjective. Like,
so
and fully.
I want to say, because I have two thoughts about this. The first is that I do feel pulled in by the heroic artwork.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about expectation.
Okay.
Because I think the art in Shadowdark does a good job of setting expectations. It's not the only way you can do that, or it's not the only way as a GM that you should set expectations, but I think sharing the art of Shadowdark with, like, including it, if you're sending an email inviting people, add in a couple of pieces of this art, if you can, to really sell the vibe. Because setting expectations is one of those things that I continually come back to as being a cornerstone of my GM practice of what can players expect when they arrive at the table? And how do I get players at my table to go from what their expectations are to what their expectations should be, right? Because and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's important that we let players know, like, this is inside and this is outside of what should be expected.
Right.
Because otherwise we're going to have a bad time. And it is okay to tell people you probably shouldn't expect to epically kill a dragon as a level 1 Shadowdark character, right? Like, that ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. However, when I look at 5th edition artwork, or I look at any heroic fantasy game that provides artwork of characters doing epic stuff, that's what I expect to do. I don't expect to roll up a level 1 character and then get nuked by goblins in the first encounter that I play through. And I think that that's been a conversation about 5th edition that's been very interesting, and I think it's kind of tired.
Yeah.
But it's worth mentioning here is that, the people who love 5th edition often love it because their characters can do all these crazy things and can deal immense amount of damage and roll lots of dice and, like, pull off all these, do all of these things that the rules let them do. And for me, it's rules plus artwork that says you're gonna be a hero, and you're probably not gonna die. And you're gonna slay monsters, and you're gonna save the realm, etc., etc. That's the expectation that players have when they arrive to the table for a game like 5th edition D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced this playing with you.
Yeah.
You didn't provide that specific style of play, right? Like, it's just not your jam.
Right.
And I know that now, but one thing that was hard for me when I first started playing D&D with you, which was really the first time that I had really played at all, other than perhaps some strange sessions that I vaguely remember from my, like, middle school days on the bus.
Uh-huh.
Which
maybe
I
the
feel
best.
Maybe.
Okay.
The expectations that I had coming in were based a lot on the art plus the rules. And that led me down a path that was not going to work for your game. And
right.
so
As I embarked on my usual kind of gritty Western adventure, you were like, when do I fly?
Excuse me, sir. I would like to cast very powerful spells and kill very powerful monsters. When do I get to do that? And, and that's now seeing Shadowdark and going back to Shadowdark, like, I can see why it resonates with you, because, and it also means that, like, the system that you've chosen, when you read it, the expectations are easier to set.
Yeah, and that piece is huge. And there have been systems historically and adventure modules in particular right now in the modern kind of OSR setting. There's a handful of companies, their art design sets a very particular set of styles and looks and feelings about the way of things you're getting into. I love the module Incandescent Grottos. It's fantastic. Every bit of it is num 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 num. From the first room you step into to the last room you encounter, it is wonderful. It is my jam. I've run it and I can't wait to run it again. And it's one of the few dungeons I'm like, no, I've seen like every room in this place with my players. Great. The art layout is off-putting to me. It's cute. It's fun. I like it. It's whimsical. It is genuinely discordant to me with that adventure. I have to kind of actively not look at it. It's a style choice, and I respect it as a style choice. And I think there's even a large group of people who are then drawn to it because of that style choice. And I'm here for that 100%. I am by no means trying to be a gatekeeper of this is good and this is bad. What I am saying is the impact those different art styles have is huge. It is massive. There's a game on Kickstarter right now that has hyper realistic art, and it is it's a fantasy setting, and it's really very realistically rendered. Like it looks almost like photographs. It's massively off-putting to me. And I think there's a lot to be said for not only what you bring as a player or a GM to your own wants and expectations and preferences, and it's okay that those are wants, expectations, and preferences, but there's also something to be said for then what the expectation, as you were talking about, that system is creating. And for a lot of, we're in an era now where there's a lot of homespun systems. Like there's people's first goes, which are, passion projects, as I mentioned earlier. Shadowdark is undeniably a passion product. Hopefully someday it will become a brand. And then that's kind of scary. Because those expectations that it has to meet shift to being a brand. And there's so much to the art and what your experience is and how you grab on to a system that it is forever one of my favorite things about role-playing to think about critically, but then also just sit back and absorb because the variety is magic.
Well, I just, so I've been running a lot of Mothership lately, and they just released their first edition. But I've been playing Mothership and running Mothership games for many years, and the thing that struck me first about Mothership was the art. The art was, I believe, at least in the 0E edition, as it is now referred, was done by Sean McCoy, the original designer of the game, alongside a couple other people, but we'll give credit in the show notes. I just really enjoyed that the art in Mothership felt like it, like you said, about the OD&D onto early 80s module art. It felt accessible, and it also felt like it was both evocative, but Mothership also doesn't have a formal setting. And I think if we're kind of hitting on something in particular that I'm kind of seeing throughout this discussion, it's that both you and I find highly prescriptive settings to be that there's no place, the setting's already done, so why would I play here? Right? Like it seems like Games Workshop has the world of 40K handled. I don't really need to play in Warhammer 40K's world for there to be new lore, for there to be new factions or chapters of Space Marines or whatever. I don't really see where I fit. And, I mean, there are settings like Faerun that there's so many years of lore. Like, I don't know that I want to play in that setting. Dolmen was a very deep setting. There are a lot of holes. There are a lot of very terse one-line descriptions that allow for iteration rather than everything being a wiki entry, right? And I don't know. I think art goes a long way to inviting people in. If your art invites people both into your world from an expectation setting standpoint, but also from a, hey, this is going to be a fun and interesting place to create. That's a hard line to walk, but I look at games like Tales from the Loop, which is based on a whole series of art pieces that came before the television show and before the role-playing game. That game has just recently grabbed onto my brain and just won't let it go, because every single piece of art is an invitation to imagine the space. There are all these incredible scenes of strangely post-apocalyptic 80s Scandinavian landscapes with these incredible mechs and big buildings. And for me, it says, hey, come and see what's inside of these crazy buildings. Come and see what's just beyond that hill. And I have been unable to find a whole lot of high quality lore outside of the television show and some of the adventures. And that to me is just fertile ground for playing in, because I don't have to worry about quote unquote getting something wrong.
Right. As you said, that ultraviolet grasslands has been.
So you mixed two games there.
Yeah.
One, which is a tabletop wargaming game about toy cars, or not about toy cars, but played with toy cars. Excellent game, by the way.
Ultraviolet grasslands has been that for me. Oh my goodness. The art is just so crazy and out there, but again, there's so much space in between the art to fill in. And even you've talked in the past about, I dare say, a level of discomfort with the depth of generic fantasy lore and
Sure.
and what that carries with it, and being somebody who didn't grow up with it all the time. I have that to a degree with some of the more odd and fringe art thing, but I always find it appealing. And a lot of modern fantasy art really does codify that stuff in a way that I don't think I was fully aware of, maybe even until this conversation, that is kind of intimidating. And I think that's one of the points I want to come back to is not only the space for your players and you as a GM to engage with the art and the vibe, but also the lack of space. That if something's really polished and designed, and for some folks that polish and design, I know makes them feel at home. You mentioned Faerun and Neverwinter. Oh my gosh, Neverwinter, the city of Neverwinter is fleshed out to every street and every house and if you've got that, what a wonderfully powerful tool to build from. But if you're just coming to it, man, that's awful intimidating. And it's interesting to see that these art styles and your sister's implication is, oh, how do I find access to this? To take it back to the comment I made about Dolmenwood, it was seeing both a piece of art you sent out to us as players, and then that kicked me over to Arthur Rackham's fairy tale art that was immediately accessible. And I think that's also another piece is what's evocative? Where does the art in the system take you to? So for me, when I look at Shadowdark's art, there is a lot of mid to early 80s UK fantasy gaming art that it's very reminiscent of. The pointillism shading, so the dots of shading, is a very, I don't know why in the UK in the 80s, it was all over fantasy art from all different companies. And gosh, it's just catnip to me. I just get excited when I see some dot shading on something. But there's a bunch of other images and genres that come to mind. The Alien films jump to mind. Every time I look at Shadowdark art, I can see the Alien movies in them, and Geiger's art. It's not there. It's not a one-to-one, but that kind of darkness that's there. But that's an appropriate analog, right? Sure. Telling somebody, hey, think of the crew in Aliens, I think more so than than Alien. appropriate. Like you could build a Shadowdark game very quickly from something like that. So it's not only what does the art show you, but then where does it take you and where does it transport you to, or does it? And I mean that's, again, I want to hammer this point of that's subjective, right? That's some of the pieces I mentioned, other folks are going to be like, yeah. What about the unified nature of it? I want to talk about that a little bit before we wrap up on this one. Is there are clearly a variety of artists who have contributed. You can check your front tables. They're given credits for their art, which is a great thing. Credit artists. But they're clearly different styles. Some of the pieces are borderline kind of silly and cartoony. Some are quite grim and realistic. There's a wide variety of art styles. It is unified in its black and white line work, but there are other companies that completely eschew this. That there's some monster tomes out there that almost every monster is rendered by a different artist and there's no connection. Do you have any thoughts on the unified art design versus a wide open art design? Or
I mean, I think it has to be purposeful. Like I would imagine if you asked Kelsey, she would say that she would give you a reason for why there isn't a unified art style. She might have already given it, and I just might not know about it. I would imagine it was purposeful. There might have been a need, right? There might have been an actual need for art to be produced more quickly or whatever it is. But to me, if you're not going to have a unified art style, which I like that better. I appreciate a unified art style. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that the two pieces of RPG material that I have engaged with the most over the last year and a half, actually more than that now, Shadowdark and Dolmenwood, neither of them have a unified art style. But I tend to like a unified art style because it means that I need fewer touchstones before I get it.
Mm-hmm.
In Dolmenwood, the reason I didn't send out any artwork early was there's just a preponderance of different styles, and I wasn't sure what style of game our game was going to be. Do I send out the kind of goofy, very much like fairy tale art, or do I send out the very grim, people being eaten by traps made of goo or something like that? Like, it just... To me, a unified art style is desirable, but as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that I have connected with two pieces of RPG media that don't have that, and the pieces of RPG material that do have that have been the ones that I have gravitated away from. So I don't know what that says, but I no longer see D&D 5th edition's art style as my touchstone for fantasy role-playing. Whereas when I started really getting into D&D, of course that was my touchstone.
Yeah, I think that's, perhaps a testament to seeing access for yourself. Of if there's a variety of art styles, then you pick which one resonates for you. Sure. And which ones aren't your favorite and which ones are. But the point you're literally going, oh, I really like this. This one's not doing it for me. You are investing and engaging with the art and the system, which is as always is a powerful place to be. I think we've kind of beat this horse, painted this brush as far as we need to. Let's oh my God. It got dark fast. There's the Shadowdark art. It wasn't me. Let's hear from our sponsors so I stop talking.
Dungeon Master Diaries is brought to you by Wizlock, the industry leader in treasure security. Wizlock is easy to install and has patented arcane technology to monitor your hoard of wealth while you return to the dungeon for more. With so many knaves and ne'er-do-wells looking to abscond with your loot, don't rely on a simple lock and key. Put your trust in Wizlock. It's easy to install. Just carve the arcane symbols into the doorframe, secure the gem above the keystone, and recite the script on the Getting Started scroll. It's as simple as that. Jody, you recently installed a Wizlock system. Was it easy? And do you feel better secured in terms of your immense treasure hoard.
Those goblins were making way with my gold coins and my doubloons on a fortnightly basis, I tell ye. But then, thanks to Wizlock, a couple quick runes, keystone at the top, and even illiterate me could follow the step-by-step simple pictures of the inscription. And before I knew it, I was cooking me some goblins, and they're not touching me doubloons no more.
Even non-magic users like you, Jody, can install Wizlock with our patented Magical Dabbler Potion add-on. Those without arcane knowledge and tomes will be able to install the device during the potion's 1 hour use time window. So if you would like to ensure the safety of your loot today, send a raven to Wizlock with your information and mention this podcast to get a free Magical Dabbler Potion add-on. That's right. You can get a free Magical Dabbler Potion add-on today just by mentioning Dungeon Master Diaries. Once you reach out, someone will be out to your abode for a free consultation, no purchase required, and you will be well on your way to treasure security. Wizlock, outsmart the knaves.
All right, we're back. Let's bring this topic into the light. And what we're going to do is a little different. We're going to share one core takeaway from this discussion, something that might be useful or to think about. And then we're going to talk about, just totally self-serving, or maybe artist-serving, our favorite piece of art from the Shadowdark rulebook. Matt, why don't you get us started?
All right, so my first takeaway is that art is a beautiful way to set expectation about what's going to happen in your game, and that it is very useful to, at the moment that you're conveying what your campaign and the game you want to run is going to be about narratively, and how you're going to make characters and when session 0 is going to be. Throw some art in there, if possible, to even further set those expectations for your players.
And I'll take that a step further and reference that art when you play is one of my takeaways. I often will reference movie scenes or images to see if my players can use those as touchstones. I know there's a long history within the ICRPG community of literally using little flash pieces of art for each scene or key elements. I think that's just such a powerful tool. If you can actually show a picture of something, especially if it is a nondescript creature, it's not a classic kind of critter you're talking about. If you can go, hey, this is what you're looking at, man, that's just a powerful, powerful tool if you can do it. Matt, what's your favorite piece of art in the book?
My favorite piece of art appears on page 266 of the Shadowdark Core Rulebook, or you can find it on the limited edition cover.
It's so good.
It is by Lucas Corte. I believe we're saying his last name correctly. And it is the decayed, desiccated skeletal remains of some ancient king sitting with a staff and a crystal ball on a throne with all manner of cobwebs and disgusting bits hanging attendant from the skeleton, and at his feet are a litany of skulls. For me, this piece of art is evocative. It is also something that you both do and don't want to find, because there's treasure. It appears the facing page is the beginning of the treasure section of the core rulebook. And I love that the facing page of the treasure section is not the place that you would love to find treasure, because you know for a fact that this dude is animating as soon as you enter the room or as soon as you take that crystal ball. I mean, it's just, you can tell what the next scene is so vividly.
Yeah, it's an evocative piece, to be sure, worthy of a cover, no less. Yeah, it's hard to beat.
What is yours?
Mine is on 233, also by Lucas Corte. It is the Minotaur, the humble Minotaur. So
Yes.
a couple things before I get into describing this piece. This takes me so quickly back to Keep on the Borderlands and the Minotaur art that changed from printing to printing in that book.
That's true.
So there
Yeah, that's
is
right.
a like deep resonance of really kick booty Minotaur art for me. Also, is this the Scarlet Minotaur from the Quick Start Guide, perhaps? That first adventure that's in the Dungeon Master's Quick Start book. So with that said, it's this powerful body, heavily muscled, carrying this very ornate axe. And maybe most intimidating is the Minotaur is not charging or swinging its axe or coming forward. It's just standing, seemingly almost at attention against a dungeon wall. You can see the spittle dripping down off of its chin, its nose ring standing there. The sense of potential energy is palpable. Whatever is about to happen next, it's going to be telling. And that's, again, there's that power of this black and white imagery that fills and just makes the Shadowdark game and book such a joy to flip through. All right, friends, as the torchlight grows dim, we hope you were able to find something useful in our discussion today that you can take into a future game. If you have any questions or unique experience from your table that you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, head over to the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadowdark Discord channel. Look for links to any materials we referenced in this episode in the thread or in our show notes. And if you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can find Jody on the Shadowdark Facebook page under the handle Pezman, and you can message Matt via Discord with the handle SCMatt. Until next time, later, nerds.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production and is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023.